Greetings and welcome to another Slave Food Conversation, where two African-American physicians, Dr. Columbus Batiste, cardiologist, and Dr. Eric Walsh, emergency room physician and doctorate of public health, explore the role of racism as a unique form of stress and the weaponization of food in the creation of health disparities in African-American communities, irrespective of income. They discovered that eating a whole food, plant-based diet in urban communities is possible and is the key to eliminating health disparities. We officially celebrate our nation's second Independence Day, Juneteenth. In 1865, on June 19th, Union soldiers arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas, and informed a group of former slaves that slavery had officially ended. This reminds me of how important it is to be informed and exercise your ability to educate yourself. Back then, these former slaves were not able to receive information readily and were reliant on others to tell them what had occurred. Today, we have the ability to make the choice to learn about ways to make a positive impact on our personal health and the health of others. As we look to celebrate Juneteenth, it is imperative that we also exercise our right to free ourselves from unhealthy food choices. On this special episode, the Slave Food team welcomed two triple threats, Dr. Milton Mills and Dr. Tracy McQuirter, to the conversation. Dr. Milton Mills is a practicing physician that has been featured in several documentaries, a lifestyle advocate, and researcher on racial bias in federal nutrition policy. Dr. Tracy McQuirter is a best-selling author, award-winning public health nutritionist, and a vegan trailblazer. The physicians will reflect on the focus on the significance of freedom from bonds of chronic disease, as well as liberation from African-American slavery, and how they coincide with one another. As always, the Slave Food team thanks you for your support. Please continue to spread the word about the Slave Food Project and click the subscribe button on your YouTube channel called the Slave Food Project. You can also register for upcoming events and conversations at slavefood.org. Now, sit back, relax, grab a healthy snack, and enjoy this holiday special.
Milton, I'm gonna have to start with women first. Tracy, it is a pleasure to see you here and to have you. We were kind of chatting behind scenes about how long we've been trying to connect. And, you know, I'm so glad that Danette gave you your honorary doctorate. In my mind, you are a doctor. You are a doctor. And so I'm quite so I'm appreciative of all the wealth of knowledge that you just get out there for all of us. So thank you. Such a pleasure to have you. The ageless beauty. That's
thank
wonderful.
you, Columbus. It's wonderful to be here with you and with Milton, with Danette, with Eric. I'm really excited to finally be on the show with you. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And to my brother, Dr. Milton Mills, man, I've known about you for years as well. Just a dynamic speaker, not afraid, unafraid to give the truth. And so when we connected, I think it was at one of the conferences, we connected and finally hooked up and we spent some time just outdoors chatting. It's an honor to get you on this show too as well. I know how busy you are, so I appreciate you making the time in honor of Juneteenth.
Yeah, thank you, Columbus, and it's absolutely a pleasure to be here. And it was at the Plantution Conference in my hometown in Oakland, California in 2019. And I, too, was really happy to finally connect with you because we also have another connection, family connection. We're both Seventh-day Adventists. And so I kind of felt like, you know, we should have been connected before then. So, yeah, this is a real pleasure to be connected.
Yes. That's right. All in this fight. So, you know, I mean, this 2020 has been insane. You know, we all have gone through some just turbulence, you know, to our families, to our friends, professionally, and everything else, the social strife that's there. And coming out of it, and we're reflecting on Juneteenth, and it seems like history is much more pervasive. I didn't learn about Juneteenth as a kid growing up. I didn't learn about Juneteenth in college. It wasn't until I became an adult that I learned about Juneteenth, and it's taken on such a significance to me personally. Tell me, for you all, we'll start first with you, Tracy. What's the significance of Juneteenth to you?
Well, I'm from DC, and we didn't celebrate Juneteenth either. And I didn't learn about it in school. I learned about it in college because I was a Black Studies major, right? And so that's when I first, my first memory of hearing about it. And this is such a timely conversation because of the federal legislation that has just passed. But, Juneteenth is interesting to me because it's a time when all of us can celebrate the federal liberation, right? The state liberation of enslaved people, because at that time, everybody knew about it, right? Folks in Texas have been celebrating it for generations. And then the rest of us came on board decades later. I love that there is a celebration of that Black folks have been doing for generations, and that has spread in Texas and then spread across the country. I absolutely love that, and that it's going to continue and get even bigger and bigger in terms of folks celebrating it around the country. But I also think about the fact that yes, this happened. Juneteenth happened on June 19th in 1865. But because of debt peonage, debt slavery, the prison labor system, we really weren't free, right? Technically, we were free, but we really weren't free. And so there's this dichotomy for me when I think about Juneteenth. And so I'll stop there, but that's what I think about. Because I didn't grow up with the celebration, I grew up with the history around it. And so that's kind of how I see it.
That's deep. That's deep. Milton, I see you nodding. What are your thoughts about Juneteenth?
Well, my mother's from Texas, and growing up as a kid, she mentioned Juneteenth, but the significance of it really didn't register with me because growing up in Oakland, we didn't celebrate it in California, didn't learn about it in school. But as an adult, it has taken on a really deep and special resonance because it is so representative of the experience of Black people in America that there was an official Independence Day for the country, but that Independence Day didn't pertain to Black people. And even Juneteenth itself, the Emancipation Proclamation had allegedly freed Black people years earlier, but the benefit of that didn't reach the people in Texas until 2 years later. And we know that allegedly the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments freed African Americans, guaranteed us the right to vote and full citizenship, but we have been waiting for those benefits to get to us for years. So we're still waiting on our true and full Juneteenth. And this legislation that's just been passed is still a promissory note that has yet to be fulfilled.
When I look at this, and for me, Juneteenth, I look historically and I always look for analogies inside of everything. And so it's very disturbing. The fact that, like you mentioned, that the Emancipation Proclamation was given, but yet folks were still in bondage. And Tracy brought up a good point, and Milton, you too as well, that still even after that, the systems were in place that kept the people who were allegedly free. And that was the thing, is that Granger actually said free and equal, right? But we know there wasn't that equality that was there. And so I equate everything. I've been told by many folks that I'm a one-trick pony, that somehow I have a way of tying every scenario back to nutrition and health somehow. And when I look at this, and I look at the significance of people living in bondage when they can be free, living in bondage, but surrounded by constraints, whether we're speaking about 13th and the amendments and so forth, but still the constraints that are there, my mind goes immediately to health. And I don't know if either of you suffer with that same sort of malady, that I do, and you can make that relationship and speak about that a little bit.
My motto and my mantra is Black lives can't matter until Black health matters.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that if we are not healthy, our lives don't have much meaning or much potential. And so you are absolutely right. We have got to look at the things that impact our health. And one of the things that I think people don't seem to realize is that the illness and the prevalence of chronic disease and endemic disease within the African American community has been part of the plan from the very beginning. This was not an afterthought. This was not an accident. It was part of the plan to keep the community sick, because sick people are easier to manage, to manipulate, and ultimately to get rid of. And so before we're really going to be able to embrace and receive our true freedom, or take control of our freedom, we have got to take control of our health. And I think that is the point that you're trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, agree with that. And one of the things that, you both know as Seventh-day Adventists is that Black folks have been trailblazers in veganism for generations, right? Obviously, from Africa, we were plant-based, not plant-exclusive. Then here, particularly in the United States, we after enslavement, we were still eating primarily plant-based foods, right? And then what a lot of folks don't know is that when we migrated up to, or when we were forced to move, right, from the South because of white terror, we settled in the North and the West. We were still eating primarily plant-based, not exclusively, but we were basically eating lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. And taking it up to after King's assassination in 1968, there was a National Food Survey that was done before, in the 60s, before King's assassination. I'm sure you all know, but I just want to make this point because it centers us in our own, it centers us, we need to know the history that we have always had agency and taken agency, right? So when this National Food Survey was done in the mid 60s, African Americans were the demographic that were most likely to meet the USDA standards for consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, right? And then in 68, after the rebellions, the fast food franchises, particularly McDonald's, and with the financial assistance and support of the federal government, infiltrated low-income Black communities and cities across the country, right, as a way to quell uprisings and resistance. And it was a mixed bag because there weren't a lot of jobs, especially for young people. So you had civil rights activists and community members and church leaders, faith-based organizations that welcomed this because it was money and resources for the community, but it was also, going to be harmful for our health. So 10 years later, when a survey was done after this proliferation of McDonald's and other fast food franchises, we were the least likely to eat fresh fruits and vegetables, right? So that is by design. That is to Milton's point. That is by design. And if people want to read more about this, Marcia Chatelain's book called Franchise just won the Pulitzer Prize in history for talking about very issues. She just won it. So people should look that up. But it's really important to understand that we actually were eating healthier overall in terms of consumption of fruits and vegetables, right? Before up through the mid 60s. And we were also pioneers in veganism at that time too. But I'll stop there because I think it's really important for us to understand that, we are fighting a system, as Milton has said.
Can I just throw in one last point? According to Pew Research, when you look—
No, wait a minute, Milton. If we're around a kitchen table, are you saying, wait a minute, can I throw something in, or are you just jumping in? What are you doing when you're out to dinner with friends, right? You just jump in, you just go at it. Like, okay, man, nah, Tracy, right? You don't have to be polite for me, man. Okay. Come on.
Well, according to Pew Research, when you look at the prevalence of veganism within the United States, 3% of the population is vegan. When you look at the prevalence of veganism within the African American community, it jumps to 8%. So we are still in the vanguard when it comes to being plant-based, and we're also the fastest growing demographic when it comes to people embracing a vegan/plant-based lifestyle. So that's also important for us to understand. This is not a white movement. This movement has a black face on it.
Absolutely. Right, and Black women in particular, I might add. But yes, it's always
y'all showing out. Yes, I agree.
For me, it's important to say that because that's
No, and it's the truth. The truth will win out.
Right, and
the truth will set you free. There you go.
We lead with abundance and lead with abundance and centering us in our own agency. That's what I say.
And listen, we all follow women. I mean, this is no offense to men out there or anything like that, but listen, the women set the tone in many instances, whether or not in the home situation, relationships, you set the tone many times and can predict a lot of times the health and outcome. But, I want to touch on, you all both brought up an excellent point about resiliency. And I want to touch on that. But first, before we do, just my little chiming in about the whole Juneteenth and this idea really of enslavement. Mm-hmm. Is I feel as if we're still living inside, as you mentioned, with the evolution of all of the fast food nation, right? And the construct of these crucibles of conflict that we reside in, many communities that we reside in, that it's created this sense where we go around in these food deserts and food swamps, and it's been manufactured, right? And it was intentionally cross-sectionally through redlining and other practices, de jure and de facto segregation that led to many of these instances that were there. But when we look at the fact that people still now, the message is out there. You have docs like Milton, you have docs like Tracy, right? The honorary doctor, who are out there spreading the word legitimately, but somehow the word is not getting to everyone as quickly as it needs to. And people are enchained to diseases. Yeah. They're enchained to pills. I mean, I'll never forget people. I remember this African-American man, he, lifted weights. He was there. He came and he saw me, and he had this second heart attack event. He was like, man, doc, no one ever told me. No one ever told me. He didn't receive the information that, guess what? You don't have to be chained to the same diseases and go in this turnstile, a revolving door of having heart attack after heart attack, of adding in your blood pressure medication. We learned really about the disparities in blood pressure. We learned about that America as a whole is really putrid as it relates to their blood pressure control. And it does not have to be that way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be that way. We assign it to our race, and people have tried to say like, oh, it's genetic because of the salt sensitivity. No, it's not. No. You see people living in Africa with a lower level of blood pressure than is inside the United States. As you move from West Africa to the United States, the blood pressure incidence rises. Right. Similar genetic background, right? We all have our similar genetic background, but even more so there. So I think that this idea of freedom in delivering the message in terms of Juneteenth, this message of freedom and potential is so, for me, impactful. And that's what I wanted to mention too as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, going back to just what Milton said after when we first started, after you made this connection and what we're talking about, it is the fact that what you eat is the biggest determinant in how healthy you will be, right? We know that. You cannot out-exercise an unhealthy diet, right? Many people don't know that, but nutrition is key. And as you get older, I mean, we know that it starts with us, these top killers, certain cancers, diabetes, unhealthy weight, stroke, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease. It starts with us younger. It can be more aggressive in certain cases. But even as we get older, right, we can age healthfully, and we don't have to expect to decline, right, and to take medication. And I think that that's what people really don't understand, right? They expect that they are going to that their health is going to decline as they get older. and that they are just going to be taking medication. And it doesn't have to be that way. And you can start at any age, really. But one thing that my mother, who will be 85, shared, has been sharing for years, is that one of the reasons she went vegan 35 years ago is because she wanted to, when she was in her 50s, is because she wanted to be able to live the life that she wanted and do whatever she wanted to do as she got older, right? That's freedom. That is freedom, right? You have the foundation. That's the foundation for you to be able to do whatever. Now, it's not 100%. We know that, but it's our best chance of being able to have that kind of freedom of movement, freedom of purpose, freedom to continue to live the life that we want as we age.
Right. And to add some historical perspective to this, Henry Kissinger said, if you control the oil, you will control the economy. He said, but if you control the food, you control the people. And when you look historically at how the U.S. government has dealt with people it has chosen to subjugate, it has first started by controlling their food source. Yep. So when it started its process of genocide against the Native American nations that were here in the United States, it first started by burning their crops. Yep. And destroying their ability to feed themselves. Mm-hmm. And that reduced them to a position of dependency. They then force-marched them onto reservations, which were intentionally chosen because this was marginal, difficult to till land that, again, required them to be dependent on government handouts. And they handed them unhealthy, processed food that would make them sick, keep them dependent, keep them docile, and have them die early. Mm-hmm. They did the same thing with Africans that they captured and enslaved on the slave labor camps that we euphemistically call plantations, which parenthetically were the lands that they stole from the Indians because they had already been, cleared of trees, rocks, and cultivated, and they were turned into these giant cotton farms. But again, Africans in West Africa, as you mentioned earlier, Columbus, were eating a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet, dragged over here, enslaved on these slave labor camps, and force-fed garbage that, again, was designed to keep them perpetually unhealthy and sick. And when they stole land from the Western lands from Mexico and reduced the Mexican citizens to a status of so-called illegals, that didn't allow them to cultivate land that they formerly owned, pushed them into a nomadic existence, and once again, put them in a situation of economic and food insufficiency and dependency that once again caused them to become dependent on the government for handouts and assistance, and they were given the types of food that don't promote health, but instead will ultimately result in chronic disease.
It's such, when you start to kind of really look into the history, and I love history. I think in a different life, so to speak, if we believe in that I would be a history teacher, a history professor is what I would be. I love history. But when you really begin to, history is something that's of the conquerors, of the victors. They tell their story. Right. Those who are not don't get to. And so one of the most interesting things is story. That's right. And so now we're starting to hear the completeness of the story to some degree, which is fascinating. But one of the aspects of it is that I like to focus on too as well is a resiliency. And so steeped within our DNA is so rich in resiliency. It's rich in resiliency that I love. Right. And so I joke around in one of our lectures and say that our health equals resiliency divided by our stress. We all have tons of stressors, racial, nutritional, everything else. But if we focus on the resiliency, we can bolster our health. And so when we look at the resiliency of even the enslaved, I was on with Jessica B. Harris. And so she said she hated the word slaves, but like the enslaved. Right. It wasn't by purpose. It wasn't a state of mind. They were enslaved. You look at the resiliency of growing their crops, of finding a way to make something out of nothing, right? Of the dandelions, of the mustards, and finding a way to cultivate. We focus on the foods that were cast off and discarded, and we highlight those inside of our remembrance of those times and call it soul food. But what about the enrichment that they provided in terms of the collard greens, the dandelions, and those rich foods, the okra, the beans that were there, the things that were there that we are finding out through science are so powerful to stem the tide of complete body and whole wellness. So speak to us a bit about the resiliency that from our culture and from around the world.
Absolutely. I mean, just hearing you talk about that just reminds me of my mom growing up in Camden, South Carolina, on a farm. And she said that they did not eat meat every day. They mostly ate plant-based foods, right? They were omnivores, but this is what they did. And, they didn't have a lot of money. But they were able to eat this, being able to eat this way and not being able to afford to have meat that that other folks were eating was a good thing, right? Ultimately. Yeah. And that's, and I think obviously folks knew that as well, that food was healthy, and that was carried, forth when we moved from the South to other places around the country. I just think, in terms of resiliency, it's the same as as us having our own agency, right? It's the same. It's really important for us to focus on what we have always done in order to sustain ourselves under a system that tries to ensure that we stay at the bottom, right? I think that, there are examples for generations. And particularly when it comes to food, growing our own food, having community gardens, having CSAs, veganizing soul food. There are just so many ways that we have managed to keep ourselves healthy, but not the majority of us. But that is changing, right? There's a large percentage of us that have been doing it. I always say that there's this stream of Black vegans flowing next to this larger ocean of Black omnivores, right? But our stream is getting larger and larger, and so we have to keep going.
I just want to sort of affirm you for your shout out to history. Number one of my minors in college was history, and I've always fantasized about ending my life as a history professor, because by then I'll have seen enough and know enough to actually be able to teach people about history. But the other place that I take a lot of my cues in life is from the Bible. And 90% of the Bible is history. And that's because, as Solomon tells us, there is nothing that is being done that hasn't been done before and won't be done again. And so by studying the past, we can learn from it. So it is super important to learn from our history. And one of the things that you learn, as Tracy said, our parents and grandparents did not eat a lot of meat because they couldn't eat a lot of meat. And even the rest of the most of the country prior to the 1940s and 50s didn't eat a lot of meat. Why? Because they didn't have electricity. They didn't have refrigerators. They had ice boxes. And an ice box was literally just that, a box with a big piece of ice in it. And you cannot keep dead flesh fresh in an ice box. So nobody had huge pieces of meat. They weren't killing cows and chickens every day. They were eating plants. And their diet was primarily a plant-based diet. And when they had meat, it was typically around celebrations and holidays. They welcomed the new year not with a roasted pig, but with black-eyed peas. Mm-hmm. And so it was the, as you say, the use and embrace of these plant foods that allowed our bodies to kind of recover themselves, rebuild themselves, kick in the genes that rebuilt and restored our health. I remember I was looking at my great aunt one day. I went to visit her, and she went out to her backyard and came back in and said, "There's some poke salad out there. She had found these wild greens growing in her yard that I had never heard of. And she's like, this is gonna make some good eating. This is poke salad. And they had a knowledge that a lot of it has been lost about the value and health of so many different plants that have these amazing healthful properties. So yes, there is this amazing resiliency that is within our community, within our culture, that we need to embrace, we need to learn from, and make sure we pass down. And as I was just telling a friend today, you know, we all look at our parents whom we love with all our hearts. We like probably 90% of what they do, but there's 10% we say, you know, later for that, right? Well, it's the same thing with the food we eat. Much of what we have embraced as soul food is good, but there's some parts we need to leave alone. And so, yeah, that's it. A lot of it has kept us going, kept us here, helped us survive and overcome, but there are other things that were bequeathed to us by this dominant culture that aren't good for us, that we need to leave in the past. We need to find a time machine, send it back to the plantation, and get on with our life.
Amen. That's right. That's right. The mystery guest over here is Dr. Walsh. He's having some technical difficulties, but he's trying his best to join us.
You know, I think part of the problem is when you are oppressed, sometimes the person you idolize most is the oppressor. There are aspects of what the oppressor does that you want to take from them and emulate because it seems like it's a place of power. And one of the things where I think that's impacted Black America, honestly, is in the realm of food. So I remember when my mother was growing up, if she said to me many times, she said, listen, one Sunday, it never happened. One Sunday, you know, we're going to be doing so good, we're going to have steak and eggs for breakfast, right? We're going to have steak and breakfast. Because to her, when she worked domestically in white folks' houses when she was younger, that was like the epitome of a meal. Now, it didn't matter that she came from Jamaica where nobody ate steak and eggs for breakfast. They ate ackee, they ate callaloo, they ate, you know, a lot of plant-based food, plantains and yam and dashing and stuff. But we have to shake that because sometimes it's what we're emulating that causes us a lot of our problems. And you guys probably already hit on this, but I think that's part of the power of Juneteenth. If you make an analogy back to food is, those slaves were sitting on plantations in Texas working for 2.5 years after they were free. Bob Marley says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And it's a powerfully true statement that some of us, you know, there's some mental change that have to happen so we don't think we're tied into some of these things. And I remember one of my good friends, his father's passed now, but he'd always say, if you don't eat pork, you're not Black. You don't eat pork. Pork made us strong during slavery. Died like 30 years before he should have eaten the pork. You know, it's unfortunate, but that kind of mentality is what we have to fight and get over because freedom really comes when you've freed your mind.
Yeah. You know, when you look at that's like almost a form of advertisement, right? So like what you described with your mom and what we describe now, we're voyeuristic, right? So we're watching people, whether it's on social media, we're looking at the television commercials, and we're essentially enslaving folks by getting to their mind, seeding in their mind that you want this chip, you want this burger, you want these fries, you want this alcohol, right? In that moment, as you're watching whatever the show is or movie that you're watching. And so it's a mechanism on top of the food, right, that almost enslaves you. So it becomes this neurobiological chemical addiction that is so hard to break, and then not even to mix in the subsidies that come in that keep you enchained inside these communities of conflict.
When I talk to people and I talk to them about changing their diet and they start up with, yeah, doc, but I can't live without. I ask them, stop and ask yourself, why do you like whatever it is you think you like? Because nobody asked for fried chicken, ice cream, or a pork chop in the delivery room. When we were all born, we were born without preferences. Everything we think we like, somebody taught us to like. And just as we were taught to like unhealthy health-destroying foods, we can unlearn those bad habits and learn to like new ones. I then asked him, I said, are you in a relationship? And most people say, yeah. I said, are you in a relationship with the first person you fell in love with? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, think back to that first fool you used to love. You thought there was a time you thought you couldn't live without seeing that person's face, and then they said something stupid or went out and bought a MAGA hat, and you like, why am I with this idiot? Okay? And you kicked them to the curb. So you can do the same thing with the food you eat.
We all hear that, but you know what? I think now, 34 years into being vegan, and what I hear is, and all of us have been vegan a long time. I think what I hear first now is I don't eat that much meat. That's a big shift, right? Now, it depends on what they're talking about, because a lot of people think fish is a vegetable, right? Or they don't think chicken is meat, right? Or they don't think turkey is meat. So we can talk about that. But I think that you're hearing that more now because people they understand that they should be eating less meat. The work that we all have been doing, our colleagues have been doing for generations has caught up with us, especially because of the internet, right? When I first went vegan, it was before the internet, right? And so you physically had to go to hear lectures. You physically had to go to the library to read books, to get books to read. You physically had to go to a place to take cooking classes, right? So how much you knew about veganism before the mid 90s, how much you knew about plant-based food was really dependent on your location. I happen to be lucky because we had a big Black vegan community in DC and in certain places around the country, right? But if you didn't have that, you didn't have the internet, you didn't know about it, right? So now, obviously, we have the internet, we've had it, and so it's exploding, especially among Black folks, as we've talked about with that 2016 Pew survey, right? We're the fastest growing vegan demographic. So, it has changed. There are more of us doing it. It's easier to find out about it. It's easier to follow your favorite vegan influencer, your favorite person who is promoting veganism. There is somebody doing it for everybody's taste, right? There's so many more places, all types of vegan food cafes and restaurants that are opening up, Black owned, around the country. So it is definitely changing. We are in a moment, right? And so it's important to acknowledge that and to know that this is where we are. Again, it's not the majority of us, but it is growing rapidly. And, so we just have to keep pushing. That's a really good thing. And also to know that, they're in places where there's food apartheid, right? Where there are not a lot of options, that we have made a way, and we can join organizations that are already working on these issues. And we can look back to see what other groups have already done, like the Black Panther Party creating the free breakfast program and feeding hundreds of thousands of kids around the country in the 60s, right? A free breakfast. So, that's the resiliency we're talking about. So, we really have a long way to go, but we've come very far also.
Yeah, and Tracy, you are absolutely right that the first thing out of folks' mouth is, I don't eat that much meat. And I'm like, yes, you do. Okay? Because the studies show that per capita, the average American eats 279 pounds of meat per year. That's on top of 40.4 pounds of cheese, okay? So, yes, you do. And then, they'll follow it up, well, what about in moderation? And I'm like, you cannot eat poison in moderation. Right. What if your child comes home and says, Mom, I want to shoot heroin, but I'm going to do it on moderation, only on Wednesdays and Fridays. Are you going to accept that? No. If something is unhealthy, it needs to stop. Because if an alcoholic tries to take a drink only on Wednesdays, he's going to end up on the floor of the bar on Friday. You got to stop, period.
And it has to be said. It absolutely has to be said, just point blank, that we can't tiptoe around the issue.
You can't.
We cannot.
But I mean, one of the things I tell people is, it's like, if I'm going to tell you, all right, Milton, we're going to run a marathon. That's 26.2 miles. Now, for you and me, well, I can't speak for you. For me, that's daunting, right? So I'm not going to start off at 26. I may not be able to start it. I may not start at 26.2 miles tomorrow. I may have to build up to it. And I think that's the beauty of science. I think one of the things that the Adventist Health Study taught us is the fact that any progression towards a healthier state is beneficial to your health, right? And it begins this process, and we combine that with keystone habits, right? Of mindfulness, of prayer, meditation, of exercise, of all these things, fresh air. Now, all of a sudden, you start to build these habits, and you become encouraged, and you move further along the chain. Because although we have to make sure we keep our target and our goal clear, right? Which is to improve our state of health, which will improve our mind and renew our purpose in life. That's where the goal is, right? For us, we have to still make sure that we're encouraging folks to stay away from our greatest common enemy, and that is the standard American diet. So that means, unfortunately, right, we craft anything into the standard American diet. We're going to have fried this, baked, whatever, battered this. And so those things that's fine if we get the process of transitioning away and we focus on our goal, which is to improve our health and eating more foods. Eric, chime in if you're able to.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I like what Dr. Milton is saying, though. I think sometimes it can be so sugar coated that you don't really get the true message. And I think you have to use not just the art of persuasion, but you have to really use the data. You have to show people the data that, in fact, it's a dose response. So yeah, if you eat meat once a week, it's better than if you eat it every day a week. But eating it once a week is actually still going to cause problems. And people don't understand that. And I also like what was said about fish being a vegetable, because a lot of people, I'm vegetarian. Okay, can you, or I'm vegan. Okay, well, we have fish. So there's a lot of educating that has to happen. But I do think, especially as healthcare people, you have to tell a straight truth.
Yeah.
Part of the problem, and
Always.
Part of the problem is Michael Greger says it a lot in his stuff. He says, sometimes what happens is we think people can't handle the full truth. And so what happens is people are left thinking they're doing the best they could possibly do when they actually could have done more. And then you have to balance that with the marathon analogy and say, listen, I don't say you stop tomorrow, but what is your strategy to stop? When I used to do nicotine dependence classes at the Veterans Hospital as a preventive medicine resident, we had a plan. There was an intentionality of how we were going to get you from here to cigarette free. And I think it's the same principle. We need a plan. Nobody plans to fail. They simply fail to plan.
Yeah,
I love that.
I absolutely agree. And I think that, so education is key, information, inspiration, affirmation, right? That's what I say. And what I have found is there are lots of ways in, right? There are lots of ways to teach people there are lots of approaches that you can take. And many approaches you should have in your arsenal, right? For lack of a better term. And what I have found in teaching people over these past 30 years what I do is ground it in other things, grounded in context, right? So the fact that you have been taught, the fact that the way that you are eating is unhealthy and you didn't know it, initially is a surprise, but it should not be a surprise if you think about systemic oppression, right? It is food and health is a component, housing, jobs, education, all of it is we are systematically oppressed around. The same with food and health. And so when you make these connections, when I make these connections, this is the way that Dick Gregory taught it to me in '86, when at the lecture in college that rocked my world and started me on this vegan path. I use that same kind of context and connection, right? And immediately people get it. They may not be able to say, I'm going to let go of meat and dairy right now, but they understand why they are eating the way that they eat, right? And so then what do? Once this light bulb has gone off, and that can be, however long it takes, a lecture, a series of lectures, a 21-day program, however long it takes for that light bulb to go off, then you have to give people a path, right? Give them a way and give them, and for me, what I do is ask them to show themselves some grace. Okay, so now you know that there is a better way. You have this information and maybe you want to start on the path, right? So understand that it can take 6 days, it can take 6 months, it can take 6 years, but you keep going and you give folks a path, a way, a step, a place to start and to keep going, right? And so that's kind of the work that I've been doing. So to shake people up and tell them the actual truth. We're out in the streets as we should be, because police kill 1,000 unarmed people a year. 40% of them are Black, right? But 300,000 African Americans die every year of primarily diet-related chronic diseases. 50,000 Black women a year die of heart disease, which is preventable, right? We're not in the streets about that. We don't know about it. And it's not a comparison game, but this is a crisis and it is affecting more people, right? Both of these are systemic, but we don't know about the food part, right? And that's just the people that the food kills, not the people that are disabled and have diminished quality of life until they die, right? So all of this, we have to tell people and then immediately give them a way, a step, a way, a path. So it's the speaking plainly, Eric and Milton, that you're talking about, and then giving folks some, a path right away, and then asking them to show themselves some grace and telling them your own story. It took me 1.5 years from that Dick Gregory lecture to actually do it, And so sharing your journey as well, I think is all a part of it, as you know. But I'm speaking to the audience.
But I'm sitting here smiling because what I love about people is diversity, and we've got different personalities, different approaches, different pathways, and I think that's the thing of beauty. Me, I'm a little more gangster. I tell people, you put that turkey in the freezer, lay on the ground, kick, scream, cuss, throw things at the wall until you get through this, okay? You got to cold turkey.
It takes a different approaches to reach different people.
It does, because I'm gonna tell y'all. Let me just give you the minute version of my story. I joined the church. I was struggling with some personal issues. Guy said to me, look, if you want a better relationship with me, you need a clear mind. For that, you need a better diet. You got to stop eating meat. I panicked, and I'm like, wow. I said, okay, God, if you want me to stop, you got to take away the desire to eat meat. He took away the desire, and I stopped, period. Okay? And I'm just saying, the Bible says that he will enable you to do what he asked you to do, and he did. And so that was it for me. And again, I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody, but I'm saying it will work for a lot of people. And sometimes we just have to lay on the floor, kick, scream, and do what we need to do. One last thing, I want to talk about transition foods, because I'm sick and tired of hearing people say, "Oh, but them vegan burgers are so processed." Look. That hamburger looks nothing like that cow it was taken from. It's been highly processed, okay? It's been skinned, cut up, ground, fried, and a whole bunch of other things. So all that dead flesh you're eating has been processed too. The study, but we at least have some science on this. There was a study done at my alma mater, Stanford University, where they compared plant-based burgers and meat analogs to actual dead flesh, and showed across the board that you got better improvements in blood work, blood lipids, nutritional profiles, blood pressure than when people ate meat. So the definitive answer is in the plant-based analogs are better for you. But no, you should not build your entire diet around these things. The goal is a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet. But yes, these things can be used as adjuncts. They can be used to help wean you off of the things that you were used to, and they are in every case healthier and better for you than eating a dead, rotting carcass.
Well, I'm gonna jump into that. I know you got questions, but I just want to go. I'm gonna go ahead and defend myself for a second. Say, don't let the smooth taste fool you, Milton. All right. So I still got a little gangster in here too as well. All right. Now, I may go ahead and just smooth it out for folks a little bit. But here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? So you're absolutely right. We want folks to be able to transition. And we want them to make that smooth transition, a blend of, for you, the blend of Tracy, blend of my approach and Eric's approach. I tell this story real briefly. We were down in New Orleans giving a talk. I'm driving around with the Uber driver, right? He drops us off after we're giving our talk and during the Essence Fest. He picks us up, but we're in traffic for an hour. So we have an hour to talk to this cat. And so I'm starting to go. He goes, oh, I looked you up. I know about that old plant-based. I was like, so come on, let's go. I'm gonna get you on the challenge. Nah, I'm not having it. Fast forward a whole conversation, an hour. At the end of the hour, and I'll tell you, I never recommend this stuff. I got him to try one of those imitation burgers. I felt like that was my greatest accomplishment. I literally just saw a patient in my clinic the other day who has a tight 80% left main. I don't know that buys this. Who refused. I've adjusted his diet. He's dropped his cholesterol all the way from 400 to 133. He's lost 25 pounds within a span of 2 months by adhering to a dietary approach where I went gangster like Milton, right? I went gangster with him in that moment. That either you do this or you don't, or you do this, but I'm recommending surgery. But if you're refusing, then this is what you need to do. And so in different situations require different tactics. Absolutely. And so I just wanted to highlight that.
Sure. Absolutely. I would agree wholeheartedly. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I got to jump in here when I can. Okay. So I've been watching the comments. Everybody is really engaged. At times, personally, I didn't know if I was going to pass the offering plate or what was going on in this particular discussion. But I've got a couple of quotes that more so questions. People are quoting what you guys are saying. So one of the things was the reiteration of the fact that the African Americans are the fastest growing plant-based vegan demographic. That got a lot of hits, a lot of interest. The African American Health House is on fire, and that came from Dr. Donna Green Goodman, who is one of our regulars. And she says that we have to get out before it burns down completely.
Amen.
And so she is saying to everybody on here, tell the truth. And then again, I want to pass the offering plate. Tell the truth. They're testifying and they're getting in there for sure. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery, which is a Bob Marley quote. I think Dr. Eric referenced, and we got that from Maria Thorne, who was also one of our regulars. So, we've just very engaged with your conversations here. One of the questions that we received in the comments was, what do you recommend to help people get off of refined sugar? I understand it is addictive, if not more than cocaine.
Well, let me tell you, I had a thing for sodas, okay? I just like to have sodas. I've switched to flavored seltzer water. And that has really helped me cut my craving for soda. I get the flavor, I get the fizz, and not the sugar. And there has been research that was done because, then there's a question of, well, are you harming yourself with the carbonic acid? And the answer is no, that it does not throw off your pH. It does not cause problems with acidification of the blood, that drinking carbonated water is fine.
Okay. And I will jump in and say sugar is the most addictive substance in the world, right? So if you want to and sugar is vegan. So if you want to let go of sugar, you really are going to have to stop eating it. And so if you can replace it with fruit, it depends on what the thing is, right? If it's baked goods, it can be fruit juice, it can be pureed fruit. So you can use dates. People say use agave maple syrup. Those are very high glycemic foods. I wouldn't, if you want to let go of sugar, I would focus on actual fruit, right? Eating fruit, adding fruit, and using fruit in your baked goods. And also upping the amount of whole food that you eat, whole plant-based foods that you eat, particularly dark leafy greens, because you have to counter that, right? Or you have to balance your diet. You have to balance that addiction to sweets. And also know that because sugar is addictive, when you stop eating it, you will stop craving it. And it usually, if you're able to do it cold turkey or just stop doing it instead of using cold turkey, but whatever. You stop doing it for 21 days. If you add it back into your diet, it will be too sweet for you. Your taste buds do change. And so it's not that you have to have willpower for the rest of your life. It's just for a short period of time until you lose that addictive taste. And then you stop eating it after that. So that's what I would say.
And the science behind that is your tongue is constantly replacing your taste buds. And every 21 days, you get a completely new set of taste buds. That's why you find that your taste perception changes after a 21-day period.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And one of the things too, as well, is you look at the rate of absorption. And so one of the things that we know with sugar is that the rate of absorption into the body and passing the blood-brain barrier is quick. It's one of the fastest. And that's the reason why it's so addictive. That's the reason why it's given to newborn babies and just enough for them to perform circumcisions on the kids, right? Is what they end up doing. So it is a very addictive substance. Is what we do to placate our kids. Give them a piece of candy and sit back there. You do this to yourself. We give it as a treat, all these variables that are there. And so we have to change our mindset once again, and we're using it as a sense of resource. We're thinking as a resource to replenish us, and it's a fake one. And that's what drives us to have more of it. It drives us to eat the wrong things more and more because we're replenishing the stress in our bodies with these, as Eric says, demands minus resources. These are fake resources.
Well, this is another Juneteenth question. What is the biggest misconception that you feel exists concerning Juneteenth?
I don't know.
I'll jump in here and just say I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's not important. This is just another quote unquote contrived holiday. And how do you have a just nation? A nation like America with the language that is in the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution, and had literally centuries of slavery and oppression, and never celebrate the fact that as a nation you grew out of it. Now it took blood. A lot of people say, America is going to pay for its, what some of its brutal past. I think they forget the bloodiest war America ever fought, where more Americans died, was the Civil War.
Right.
In the very blood, over 200,000 black soldiers actually went into the South as well to fight for freedom. So when people think it's like a cast off holiday that's just being added, I think about Labor Day. What event does Labor Day represent? It represents the fact that we all work, which I'm not really all into celebrate. I'll take the day off, but I was at Juneteenth is part of the reckoning America must come to.
Absolutely.
In order to control its moral character.
Absolutely. And you can't acknowledge Juneteenth without acknowledging slavery, right? You can't say. And so kind of on the back end, by acknowledging Juneteenth, you can't say there was no slavery and this was not a big deal, right? So it's almost kind of a back way of making sure that gets addressed publicly. And I think it's a good start.
Well, and I think that Juneteenth is going to take on even greater significance now because of all of these Republican legislatures passing these laws saying that you can't teach critical race theory. So they have now created the absurdity of saying, well, you can't talk about racism officially, but now we have this holiday that sort of highlights the history of racism in America. That's why I know God has a sense of humor, because he's like, okay, I can show you better than I can tell you.
And also, people have been fighting for, or people have been wanting to have, for decades, wanting to have this be a national holiday. Black folks have been fighting for this for generations. And so we have to, this is coming from us, right? This is a fight that we've been having. While people have been celebrating it, they've also wanted there to be a national holiday, a federal recognition. At the same time, it came, it came this week, and a lot of folks are saying, we didn't ask for it, but folks did ask for it. Folks have been fighting for it. And as Eric, you said, it's a compliment too. It should be a compliment too. Like it's not reparations, and it's not defunding the police. It's not ending police brutality, and on and on and on, right? But it is something that Black folks have been fighting for generations.
Like Passover, we're going to have to explain this. People are going to say, why is Juneteenth important? Then you have to explain it, which means you have to explain the history of Black people in America.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And one other additional point is the fact that when you look at Juneteenth, it's the first recognition of a systemic racism. So after the slaves were freed, they were still enslaved. And so multiple issues, whether or not it's the amendment or our current system and structure, it still points to the fact that you have these barriers that are in place from people truly being free, and they have to be freed, whether or not it's health issues, social issues, education, business, access, just equality, not more than, just equal, right? I want the equal opportunity to eat healthy. I want the equal opportunity to have business and live a life in that regards.
One thing that's very relevant is that Republican Texas has had this as a state holiday before it was a federal holiday.
Right.
And every Republican senator voted for it. I think it's the statement that this is just such an obvious reality that needs to be recognized, because again, it took a lot of American blood on all sides. I would say most importantly, the blood of slaves, but on all sides for this to come to fruition. Both of these individuals are heroes of mine. I think the work, and I think, I don't even have to say it, when you listen to Tracy speak, her passion and her depth of knowledge is absolutely impressive. And on her website that she does speaking engagements. So people need to be lining her up to come speak at their functions, for sure. And it's really refreshing to hear her. She's very balanced, very profound. And of course, Milton, we've seen you on documentaries and so forth. And you were leading the charge early on, honestly. Even before Columbus and I were putting this together, seeing you in What the Health, honestly, really was one of the highlights for me, because it wasn't a very Black movie. Nothing wrong with it. Even if you hadn't been in it, it was still a great movie. But you really made it personal for me, and it really, I was really happy to see that. So I want to just, I normally would have given the accolades at the beginning, but I don't want us to come off and not really point out that you guys are superstars in this field. And honestly, what is being done is a battle for lives. It is a battle for minds. It is a battle against disability. It is a battle for spirituality. All of the things that kind of have been touched on in this talk. So this is very, very relevant. And that's why I like how it correlates with Juneteenth, because nothing can enslave you like food, which is why the project is the Slave Food Project. Nothing can trap you like food. I've seen people dying in the hospital and of diabetes, amputation after amputation. They've been given weeks to live, and their family's still sneaking them in fried chicken, oily foods, French fries, cheesy this, and you're like, man, is food really that important that you're gonna lay on this hospital bed and die with it? And something that Dick Gregory said all those years ago was, we feed people the very same food at the funeral that caused the person to die in the first place. I never forget when he said, I heard him say that, and I was a teenager. I almost fell over when I heard him say that. So, or I read it, wherever I heard it from. And so that's the work that this is, and why Juneteenth also should represent liberation from so many other things today, because we're still, in many ways, enslaved.
I'll go and let Tracy bring it home. I think one of the most inspiring messages Juneteenth gives us is that justice delayed is not ultimately justice denied. And that is also true for our health, that while we may suffer from the ill effects of poor dietary choices if we change those choices and if we embrace a healthier plant-based diet. God has given our bodies an incredible ability to heal themselves, and we can reclaim our health just like we can reclaim our freedom and go on to live free, healthy, whole lives. And so that's the message I would like for us to take from Juneteenth with respect to our health.
It's been an honor to be on the show and in this conversation. I've been very moved by it, and I'm buzzing with it. And so it will stay with me through tomorrow as well. So thank you all for this. And what has come to my mind about to say about this question or about Juneteenth and to leave us with is the fact that during enslavement, people resisted, right? People ran away. People who didn't run away resisted on the plantation, right? Even in enslavement, the worst of the systemic oppression that we have faced, right? People resisted. And so in this system, in this food system that we have, you can personally choose to resist. Even if folks around you, the majority of people around you are eating the standard American diet, you yourself can resist. You yourself can free yourself. Start to do that. You don't have to wait for everyone else. You can resist. And that takes mental fortitude, that takes seeking out information, all of the ways, community, all of the ways that you can get, resources and support to help you, but you can resist and you can decide to free yourself and to start that process. And so that's what has come to mind to me. We can resist even within the circumstance that we're in now and free ourselves.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much for that. Both of you, all three of you are always inspiring me. I'm always inspired by Eric. And it's a pleasure to have both of you on once again. And Tracy, you bring back echoes of Jessica B. Harris, and she spoke about the enslaved having the power of no. The power of no is the one thing that could not be taken away from them. And that's one thing that you have that empowers you as well. So I want to leave the folks out there with this Juneteenth message of the power of no, built surrounding the communities of resilience. There's some work that's being done at Morehouse University, one of the historically Black colleges and universities, in looking at the power of individual resilience inside communities, that irrespective of their surroundings, irrespective of their conflict, of their state of affairs, that this internal resiliency, recognizing that you have it there, is more inclined to lead to positive health outcomes. And so I want to encourage you that you too have built in your DNA a level of resiliency. We all do, right? And embrace that resiliency through your mindset, through your spirituality, through your nutrition, through the trust in God. All these aspects become so important and quintessential to your success. So I'm honored once again to be in the presence of giants. I remember my father-in-law used to say, hey, Columbus, do you get proud when you see boxers, Black boxers, and they win? And I was like, I don't know. But when I saw the likes of Obama, I was proud. When I see the likes of Milton, as Eric said on the movies, or I see the likes of walking through the shelves as I'm making my exploration, I see by any greens necessary on the shelf, I'm inspired. And so today I'm inspired again. And so to those out you who are viewing, like this, share this, blast this. Let's be part of a movement. Let's be part of a change that needs to happen inside of our world, inside our communities, inside of Black communities. So I want to thank for all of you, for Milton, stay on, Tracy, stay on, Eric, stay on. But I want to acknowledge our moderator, to Danette, Batiste, Brian Hardy's not here, our sponsors, Healthy Heart Nation. Thank you for your support inside of this project. We want to as well go ahead and thank you as well for following us at Slave Food Project on YouTube, @_Slave Food on Instagram, and at Slave Food on Facebook. Let's continue to build this, and we'll see you next time, next month. Thank you. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you, everyone.
Listen, Eric Columbus, I don't quite know how to articulate just how much it means to me to have been on this program with you guys tonight. I feel like I've been invited home. Thank you for having me. This has just been really meaningful, honestly.